And I'd like to say a big thank you to Melanie and also to Andrew Brightman for making this opportunity for us to share this very, very important subject with you. By way of background, my name's Russell Ball, founder of Fund for Trees. I started years ago, 40 years in arboriculture. I remember I did my first gardening job and I was earning £1 an hour. That's £1 an hour. That was a good few years ago when I was 14. I'm now 63 this year. So, and I've worked in various sectors in the arbor industry. I started out many, many years ago as a tree officer at Harrow Council in the Parks Department. And for those of you that know Jim Mead very well, he was one of the best climbers that we ever had. He was an absolutely brilliant chap, and he's so knowledgeable. And I'm pleased to say that we've remained good friends ever since. So, hello, Jim, if you're in the audience enjoying the sandwich. So, back to Fund for Trees. It's a registered charity founded in 2011, and our main remit is to raise funds for research into the better care of urban trees and also to promote best practice. One of our other main objectives is to engage with the, oh, bless you, Melanie, is to engage with the public, principally schools, on the benefits of urban trees. And we do that via cycle rides, which we do each year. We typically pick 3 schools, we cycle around, we get trees sponsored by Bartlett's, there we are, and then we plant the trees. But more than that, we have aftercare workshops to demonstrate to children how to best plant trees, but moreover, why we are planting them. And I'll talk about that in a moment. So, in fact, Griswold and Tom's back in the day, they funded one of my long rides. I did 3 long rides. I did Land's End, John O'Groats on my bike, no support, on my own, and then I did the capital cities, which Griswold and Tom's sponsored. So I left London from the G&T yard in London, near Twickenham, I think, cycled to Cardiff, and then on to Dublin, and then Belfast, and then Edinburgh, and then back to London. And the last one I did was to cycle from the Gibraltar Botanic Gardens in Gibraltar, Spain, up to the Botanic Gardens in Kew, which was quite a feat. It was about 1,500 miles on my own. Cycled till my nose bled twice. There we are. Anyway, swiftly moving on. So, Melanie, can we have the next slide up, please?
Yeah, that's live.
So I'll click it on my end. So why plant urban trees? Well, there's two main reasons. Replacement. Over time, in towns and cities across the UK, trees die or they're taken down for infrastructure projects or part of development sites. So obviously, if we're not replacing the trees that we're taking down, then we're going to end up with a deficit, and our urban forests are going to get smaller and smaller. But another reason for planting urban trees is to plant more, basically. Landscape value. I mean, that slide there just shows you, doesn't it, from the air, the urban forest from the air. Look at the landscape value that all those trees provide. And those trees were planted, decades before, so that the benefits now are enjoyed by us in this present generation. But the other thing is the difference with or without trees. I don't know whether any of you are old enough to remember the 1987 storm, where we lost 15 million trees overnight. And the landscape in London and the south looked absolutely devastated, because those big trees that you kind of took for granted were no longer there because they were blown over. So, and then we turn to ecosystem benefits. Now, this is a slide provided by TDAG, and there's about 6 or 7 of those benefits highlighted if you can see the screen. One of them is air quality. Obviously, trees absorb atmospheric pollution, which is good. They also attenuate stormwater runoff, so they actually intercept the rainfall via their leaves and branches and stop flash flooding. They also bring in wildlife into a city, namely biodiversity. They also cool cities. Thanks to climate change, our cities are getting hotter for longer, and some of the temperatures are becoming very unbearable. And it's just that trees provide a lovely cooling effect, both for us, but also for buildings. See if I can find another one there. And they can increase property values, obviously. So, but in the bottom left-hand corner of that slide, you'll see the numbers 5, 27, and 60, and that's trying to put over the point that trees over time get bigger. And in terms of tree size, the ecosystem service benefits, namely more leaves, bigger canopy, the ecosystem service benefits of those trees as they grow gets bigger and better and better. So the bigger the tree, the more valuable it is in terms of its ecosystem service benefits and its landscape, I suppose, public visual amenity that it provides. So now then, let's go to the next slide here. So use of stakes and ties. Now, the reason why we're talking about stakes and ties is that we'll drill down into this in a minute. But the reason why we're talking about this is if they are not used correctly, they can affect trees very, very badly. And in terms of numbers, it's probably in the region of about, well, there's hundreds of thousands of these trees that are affected. So it is a massive, massive issue. And once you get your eye into spotting these trees, you'll basically see them everywhere, absolutely everywhere. And when I say everywhere, that includes public parks, cemeteries, schools, business parks, residential outlets, front gardens. They are literally everywhere. So yeah, it's a massive, massive issue. So stakes and tree ties. This is a British Standard Institute drawing here, which shows typically, how to stake a tree. And obviously they are put in because when a tree is first put into the ground, and we're normally talking about a 12 to 14 centimetre girth tree, so something like about 2 meters. They can come in larger sizes. But the role of the tie and the stake is to anchor the tree in the ground for the first 3 to 5 years, so that it gives a chance for the root system of the tree to grow out into the surrounding soil and stabilize itself. So once the tree is stabilized, once it's established, it's time to take the tie and the stake away. And you should do that. That should be planned in. When you're planting trees en masse as a project, there should be an aftercare plan for those trees, which factors in the stake to be taken away after 3 to 4 years. Obviously, you can review that and slacken the tie off. But normally 5 years is the maximum. It really is the maximum. So next slide, Melanie. So I've just taken an extract. So obviously this is the tie here. So when to remove, I'll just repeat, maximum of 5 years. You should not really be leaving the tie on for much longer, because if you don't, this is what you see. These are 5 slides, images supplied by Daisy Brassington. As you can see, it's pretty graphic. I don't really need to explain the effects or the visual kind of wow factor that you see when you spot these trees. And as I said before, once you get an eye in for these trees, you will spot them everywhere. They are everywhere in all sorts of ownerships. Now, sometimes it can be because there was no money for aftercare, and that is a big problem, especially with council plantings or big grant funded programs, whereby it's easy to get the capital money to buy the trees and plant the trees in the first place, but it's very difficult to get the revenue funding, which picks up on the aftercare, part of which is de-staking. So if you're out there, well, you won't be doing it, but council tree officers and big charity tree planting organisations should be looking at having balanced capital and revenue budgets. But that's a discussion, Melanie, for another day, because you've got another exciting project coming up with that. So that's what you're looking at, and that's what happens if you don't de-stake trees. Next slide. So there's a little bit going on in here. So if you can imagine, you've got a tourniquet around your wrist, and every week, every month, somebody just tightens a screw, and that tourniquet gets tighter and tighter and tighter. So if you can imagine what would happen to your hand if that was to occur, it would probably start going blue, and then it will probably go yellow, and then it will probably go green, gangrenous, and then have to be amputated. So a bit graphic, but it kind of gets the story in terms of trees being strangled at stake. It puts it in human terms, so we can now talk about it in tree terms. And there's 2 factors which are interrelated. First of all, on the slide on the right, you can see tree tie material. It's usually plasticized or rubber, has some flexibility, but really is not that flexible. And crucially, this tree tie material can last for years and years and years. Certainly much longer than 5 years, more like 10, and maybe even a little bit longer. The other factor that interrelates with that is the biology or the botany of a tree, in the sense that the trunk will grow year on year on year on year and get thicker and thicker and thicker. So you've basically got a bit of a war raging underneath that very tight tie, as the pressure from the trunk increases outwards, and then the immovable tree tie, which stops it happening. So the net result is the tissue, I'll talk about that in 1 second, gets crushed. So here's a bit of botany for you. if you imagine that tissue underneath that restricted tie, 3 types of tissue: cambium, living tissue, which basically is the cell factory for the trunk. So it increases the girth by putting phloem outside of the cambium, and this is just under the bark, and then xylem on the inside edge of the cambium, and that's what gives you the annual rings normally that you see. So cambium is a cell factory. Phloem takes the sap up from the roots in the spring, up through the trunk and out to the leaves, so that the leaves can be fed, if you like, and then expand and grow. And then the xylem, and then the phloem then takes that sap down from the canopy to be stored in the roots over winter. And then the xylem, of which you can see that tissue there, that is a conductive tissue that's very important, and that takes water with dissolved mineral elements from the roots underground, obviously, up the trunk and into the leaves, part of transpiration. So as you see, there's 3 very, very vital living tissues there, without which, if they're not properly functioning, then the affected tree will either suffer from vitality. It won't grow very well, and as it becomes chronic, the likelihood is the tree will die. So it's a very, very, very interreactive factor 1, factor 2 interacting to cause that damage. So next slide. So the net result, well, hopefully I've graphically illustrated with the cambium, the xylem and the phloem that affected trees will struggle to establish. They will be damaged, and many of them will die. So, and as I said before, the loss of ecosystem and landscape benefits if they don't survive. So they were planted, obviously, these new trees in order to enhance the landscape and also to perform a range of ecosystem service benefits, which will never be realised if these trees don't establish and mature. And when you think about the cost of it, the average cost to plant a 12 to 14 centimetre girth tree at £350 per tree, if you imagine the hundreds of thousands and likely many more hundreds of thousands of those trees that don't make it, what an absolute waste of public money and money for anyone that buys and plants a tree. So destaking and taking the tie away is so vital. So how to spot a strangled tree? Well, you've seen those slides before. I've just put one up as an aid memoir. So obviously, as you're out and about in your community doing your operational work, are you aware that the tree was planted or trees were planted more than 3 years ago? Because if they're still on stake, the chances are they've been forgotten or they've been abandoned. The other thing to look at is the tie overly tight and difficult to move by hand. And this relates to the other one below. Is the trunk bulging above or below? Because as that vascular tissue, the cambium and the xylem and the phloem, tries to expand, it will bulge above the tie and below the tie. As I say, when the pressure gets too great, the tree will be really, really affected. If you can get access to the tree, you can actually try and pull the tie away and see whether there's a texture in the bark, a difference where the trunk's being crushed. You'll probably see lots of earwigs in there as well. And then obviously if the stake's been on for a long time, often the base of the stake has been on there for so long that it's rotten. So it's a case of the tree now supporting the stake, not the other way around. Again, an indication that that tree was planted at least 3 years ago, if not more. So I want to talk about your role in all this. Obviously, thank you for attending and maybe taking notes. Is the role of Don't Walk By. When I first met with Andrew Brightman many months ago, he thought this was an absolute awful situation, which Nurture could get involved in sort of making it a thing of the past. And he explained this thing called Don't Walk By, which I didn't understand to begin. He said to me, well, imagine if you're doing your job and you walk past a drain cover that's broken. You don't walk by, you return to your office, you have a chat with your manager, and perhaps by the reporting system called Hive, the drain cover is reported for remedial repair, and then it's all sorted. Now, we could do exactly the same thing with strangled and abandoned trees. When you're going around doing your operational duties, you could note these trees, location, where they are, hopefully get back to the office, report it on Hive, so then it can actually be reported to the client to then have those strangling trees, tree ties and stakes removed. So there is a vital role for you to be involved here. And I hope it's interesting enough that you care about the environment enough that you will actually engage with this. And as I say, once you get your eye in to looking at these trees and seeing how they struggle and how their trunks are being crushed, literally, how they're struggling to survive and how many will die, hopefully you'll get involved. And just the last slide. So I'd just like to say again, thank you to Melanie Hiblin and also to Andrew Brightman for the opportunity to speak today. And just a little bit of an advert for a ride that we've got. This is being funded by Nurture, which is great news. It's one of our rides with schools that I talked about before. It's in Birmingham. It's 2 rides in one this time. So on the 10th of September, going from Birmingham, we've got an 80-mile hardcore ride, which is going around the outskirts of Birmingham. And then on the 11th of September, we then got a more social ride, about 15 to 20 miles, and we'll be doing the aftercare workshops in 3 schools. So if you're interested, please make your interest known to either Melanie or Andrew, or you could email me on the email address below. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Russell. That was really insightful. I think there's been a lot of value to be found in that presentation, and we can hear your passion, definitely. So and you're bang on time finishing up. So thank you everybody for your time this afternoon, and wishing you all a great rest of your day. Do tune in to the next Lunch and Learn, which I think is the 22nd of April. In the meantime, find the recordings on the intranets, and if you want any more information, please feel free to reach out to Russell directly. Okay, thanks again, and everyone enjoy your day. Take care.
Thank you very much, Melanie. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Melanie, was that all right?
I'm just stopping recording.